"The will has been changed," the attorney said, and every chair felt farther away. "My name is Tamsin Alder, 34, bookkeeper by trade, careful by nature. I was raised in a seaside town where the boats whisper against their ropes at dusk. My mother died when I was 8, and my father left when I was 10. My grandmother, June Alder, carried me through the thin years with a thrift store coat and warm bread. She taught me to read bank statements like weather, to keep receipts, to keep grace. She kept a china teacup on the windowsill so she could watch the light move through it. That teacup is the first thing I remember wanting. The second was her approval. I thought both were mine. June's house was a salt-shingled rectangle on a hill, neat and private. Inside were quiet rugs and one clock that never rushed. I mowed her lawn every Saturday, handled her bills every month, and drove her to the doctor when her breath grew shallow last winter. She would squeeze my hand in the parking lot, smiling at nurses, always insisting I take an extra muffin from the lobby. "For the road," she said, as if the road were long and I were brave enough for it. When she died in early spring, my aunt, my uncle, and 3 cousins appeared like a tide. They moved through the house with soft voices and quick eyes. There were casseroles and chrysanthemums, and a framed photo of June between candles. I brought the binder with her policies and accounts, balanced to the penny. I wore a black dress with a smooth hem and kept a pen in my palm. I believed preparation could warm grief the way a kettle warms a kitchen. We gathered at the attorney's office on a windy afternoon. The room smelled like paper and lemon oil. My aunt, Veda, crossed her legs and drew her sweater close. My uncle, Roy, chewed an invisible thread. The cousins only glanced at me as if my presence were a civic formality. The attorney, a polite man with silver hair, opened a folder and unfolded the last will and testament of June Alder, dated 6 months before her death. He read a preface in a neutral voice about love, gratitude, and modest means. Then, brisk as a tide change, he read bequests: the house to Aunt Veda, the savings account to Uncle Roy, jewelry and family heirlooms to the cousins, listed by name, with the china teacup going to Veda's eldest because she stopped by on Wednesdays. There was no mention of me. Not a book, not a chair, not a sentence with my name in it. I felt the first wound then, a clean slice that did not bleed until I tried to breathe. No one looked at me. Veda smiled without teeth. Roy leaned back, as if he were being confirmed. Someone passed me a tissue I had not asked for. I heard the clock, not ours but just like ours, and the sound was unfair in its calm. The attorney's voice softened for the closing clause, then stopped. The air closed around the absence of my name. "Is there another document?" I asked, careful to keep my mouth even. He shook his head, regretful, administrative. My fingers pressed my pen so hard the clip left a mark. What I felt was not rage. It was the heavy quiet that follows a door closing. I was not entitled to June's house, or anyone's approval. Yet the math was wrong. For years I had seen every line of her accounts, each check she signed, each note in the margins with questions for me. I had been the Wednesday visitor every day, not one afternoon a week. The will told a different story, and the difference made a sound. It was small, like paper slipped into a drawer. I heard it anyway. When we left, the wind struck my face with the raw salt smell of the harbor. My cousins went to lunch. Veda's heel snapped in a crack in the sidewalk, then caught again. I stood on the corner with my binder and the polite ache of being unchosen. I could accept what a signature said. I could also wonder who guided the pen. Grief made rooms larger. It pushed me to the edges of conversations and let me hear the shells of words. In June's kitchen, people refilled coffee and tried to sound gentle. The house already seemed to lean toward my aunt, as if furniture could read legal language. I helped stack plates, tucked a clean dish towel over crumbed cake, and listened. June was clear, Veda said, not to me. She wanted this house to stay in the family. She meant her branch. Roy nodded as if he had done something brave. The cousins whispered about where the piano would go. I thought of the piano's quiet afternoons, my grandmother's thumb pressing a single note to start checking a melody. That thumb had been steady. When she wrote checks to me for utilities, I paid on her behalf. The will had a different rhythm. I slept at my apartment that night, a small second-floor place above a tailor who left a lamp on for the comfort of his suits. The room was neat because I needed order. I set June's old key on my nightstand and watched it catch the hall light, a small instrument with one job. I dreamed of a shoreline where the tide went out and did not return. Days fell into arrangements. I took a leave from my bookkeeping clients, returned calls from people who pronounced condolences like apologies, and began the slow work of logging June's papers. I had always kept a ledger for her, not for control but for safety. Now I turned the practice to my own protection. In a legal pad, I wrote dates on the left and feelings on the right because naming saved me from diffusion. My pen moved like a metronome. Hurt. Steady. Unheard. Steady. At the house, Veda sorted. She used bright pink sticky notes, one for each room, and set a cardboard box by the front door labeled donations in fat letters. She was not cruel, only certain. She handed me a grocery sack with a sweater that smelled faintly of cedar and said, "You can take this." It was kindness that missed. I thanked her, then asked for June's recipe file, which held the lemon bread card in my mother's handwriting. "Of course," she said, after a pause that told me she had considered its value. She gave it to me with a cautious smile, as if I might bite it like a dog. Roy scheduled an estate sale, which he called practical. Strangers walked through the rooms with their hands folded behind their backs, like visitors at a museum who disapproved of the curation. They spoke in numbers that seemed modest to them and indecent to me. I stood on the porch and felt the shape of each object as it left. The piano rolled across the hallway like a patient, then into a truck with a long sigh. Someone bought the clock. The walls learned the new silence quickly. In that quiet, suspicion grew like a vine that respects no fence. I did not accuse. I adjusted. I went back through my records, setting bills and statements in a line across my dining table. Last fall, a wire transfer appeared from a brokerage I did not recognize, small but neat. In winter, a new safe deposit box fee appeared, and then canceled. The will's date sat between those entries like a house number. I circled it. On a windswept evening, I walked to the cliff where the lighthouse stood. I had stood there with June when I was 15, sulking about a school dance I had not attended. She had handed me a pair of binoculars and said, "Find the boat that is yours, then find out what water it likes best." I had laughed then and told her I could not swim. She had looked at me sidelong and said, "Then you will walk." I thought of that while the water slapped the stone. I did not know if the will was fraud, manipulation, or a late change of mind. I knew only that June's love had been a daily fact. I felt its ledger in my ribs. I had no interest in court fights or public scenes. I wanted clarity. I wanted the truth to sit upright in a chair and face me. Under the lighthouse beam, I made a decision that felt like standing still. I would not act from anger. I would ask questions quiet and exact and follow where they led. I pressed the old key in my pocket until its teeth marked my skin. The mark told me what I needed. I would find what was hidden, not to claw anything back, but to know what I had already carried. I went home and sharpened 2 pencils. I slept without dreaming. In the morning, I began. I started with the safe deposit box because fees rarely lie. The bank was built of brick and impatience, with pens on chains and a manager who liked policies more than people. I asked about the box with my grandmother's name. The clerk checked, then shook her head. "Closed," she said, tapping her screen. "Closed 2 months before she passed." "Could you tell me who closed it?" I asked, voice even. She could not, but she could tell me the number of the box and the date. I wrote both on my legal pad, then thanked her like a person who had changed a tire for me. On my way out, I saw Mrs. Henley, June's neighbor, a retired art teacher with soft scarves and harder eyes. She took my hand as if I were a painting she was about to restore. "Come by later," she said low. "There is something you should see." I went that afternoon, carrying lemon bread wrapped in a clean towel because bringing something felt correct. Mrs. Henley led me to her small sunroom, where plants made their quiet weather. On the table sat a shoebox with a rubber band. She patted it once, as if studying an animal, then slid it toward me. "Your grandmother gave this to me in January," she said. "She asked me to keep it until you came to claim it." She was clear about two things. 1. Do not let your aunt take it. 2. Make tea before opening it. We made tea. It was a ceremony and a kindness. I broke the rubber band and lifted the lid. Inside were 2 envelopes and a tiny notebook bound in blue cloth. The first envelope held a key, a different one, attached to a brass tag stamped with the number of the bank box I had written. The second envelope held a single sheet of thick paper, folded twice. On the outside, in June's slow script, was my name. I waited until my breath matched the plant room. Then I unfolded the letter. "My girl," it began, and the room shifted. "If you are reading this, I have done something you will not like. I changed my will. I did it because I am tired of fights that start in kitchens and end in winters. I did it to keep Veda and Roy from tearing each other apart over you. They will not fight me if they believe I have disappointed you. I grew up during rationing. Disappointment is a resource. Forgive me for using it. What matters is not on paper. It is in the deposit box. Do not let anyone tell you that love has to be witnessed to be true. The papers say one thing. The ledgers say another. Choose the ledger." I read it twice, then once more, slower. Tears came in a clean fall, like the first rain after a long, mutinous summer. The little blue notebook held a record of deposits to an account I did not know, her careful figures marching like humble soldiers. Each deposit was small. They added up to something steady and warm. The last page had a line in large letters, as if to herself. "For Tamsin's boat." The brass key turned the bank manager into a different person. His eyebrows lifted, respect replacing policies. In the vault's chill, the box slid out with a quiet slide that felt like consent. Inside were certificates for a modest mutual fund, a paid deed to a small parcel of land inland, and a third envelope, heavier than it looked. I opened it in a private room while the manager watched the door. Inside were photocopies of checks I had not known she made, notes she wrote in the margins about my mother's smile, and a letter addressed to the attorney, dated the same day as the new will, affirming the separate trust she had opened for me, to be revealed at my discretion. Mrs. Henley became my ally by simply sitting beside me while I organized the fines. She corrected my posture when I hunched over the table. "Dignity," she said, as if it were a posture more than a principle. I called a lawyer recommended by a client, a woman named Anna Rhodes, who listened without interruption and said, "Bring what you have. We will treat this like a lighthouse chart. No more guessing where the rocks are." With Anna, we mapped out exactly what existed. The household will favored Veda and Roy, public and clean, with signatures and witnesses. The trust, formed quietly and funded steadily, named me as beneficiary and successor trustee of assets June chose with blunt affection, designed to avoid the theater of probate. There was no drama to it, only intention. In the letter to the attorney, June had asked him to keep the trust confidential to reduce conflict and to release it only upon my request. He had, obedient to her plan. The plan had hurt me, and still, I could see the shape of her logic. She knew her children. She trusted my patience. We scheduled a meeting for Friday, all parties present. Anna prepared the documents and the sequence of facts like a careful recipe. "My job," she said, "was to be still and to speak only when necessary." "You have what you have," she said, firm as a countertop. "Let the paper say its lines. Let theirs say theirs. Truth does not mind air." The conference room was the color of dust and discipline. The attorney sat at the head of the table, composed as a man who prefers nouns to adjectives. Anna sat beside me with her files aligned like small, polite soldiers. Veda and Roy entered with coordinated frowns, followed by cousins who wore expressions that rehearsed surprise. Mrs. Henley did not attend. She had already done her part and returned to her plants. We began with formalities. The attorney reviewed the will, again, in case repetition could make it kinder. He cleared his throat as if noticing the bruise in a room. Veda folded her hands near her mouth. Roy leaned back to claim calm. Anna waited. Waiting can be a kind of pressure. When the recital ended, she slid a single folder to the center. "We appreciate your time," she said. June Alder also established a trust. She asked that it remain private until her granddaughter chose to reveal it. Today she chooses. She opened the folder and arranged papers like a hand of cards she had no need to hide. The trust documents lay at the top, properly notarized, dated the same day as the new will. Next were the account statements, the mutual fund certificates, the deed for the small parcel of land, and copies of June's letter to the attorney. At the bottom was the letter addressed to me, its warm handwriting radiating a presence that asked nothing. Veda's mouth flattened. "This is not right," she said, a whisper that had trained to be a speech. Roy laughed once, sharp. "You're telling us there were two plans," he said. "One for us to see, and one for her favorite." "No," Anna said. "One for public distribution, and one for stability. Both signed by your mother. Both lawful. The will distributes the house and certain personal property. The trust contains assets she kept apart. They do not conflict." Veda turned to me. "Why hide this?" she asked. "Why humiliate us with a performance?" Her tone made the furniture flinch. I kept my voice level. "I did not hide it."
"She did."
She asked the attorney to hold it until I asked. "I am asking now because I prefer truth to rumors." I felt no need to defend love. Roy looked to the attorney. "Can she do this?" he asked. The attorney nodded once, the kind of nod that closes a question like a file drawer. "She did," he said. Cousins shifted in their chairs, calculating a pie that had been cut behind their backs. Anna slid one more item forward, the blue notebook. "This is her hand," she said, not as proof of law, but as proof of intention. "It shows her funding of the trust over years. It is a grandmother's ledger. I recommend you treat it as sacred, even if you do not find it satisfying." The room tightened, then loosened, like lungs learning a different kind of air. Veda straightened. "Then let us be practical," she said, trying for command. "The house is mine. The savings are Roy's. The rest is this secret thing."
"Fine.
"But certain items, heirlooms, must be shared." Anna's mouth inclined. "The will makes specific bequests," she said. "I suggest following it. My client will not contest your house or your savings. She will not seek to unwind anything. She will continue to manage her trust as her grandmother intended. No one needs to leave here a villain." I watched Veda's eyes flick to my face, searching for triumph. She would not find it. I was tired of rooms that asked me to perform either gratitude or outrage. I put my hands on the table the way June had put hers on her piano, soft and square. "Grandmother left each of us something," I said. "She left you the house because you like walls you can see. She left Roy cash because he likes totals. She left me a chart and a map. She left us all the burden of believing her love could be measured by what we can carry." I paused so the words could sit down. "I will not fight you for furniture, but I will keep what she asked me to steward." Silence found the corners. The attorney closed a file and set his pen on top of it with a precise click. Papers rustled the way winter trees rustle, with no leaf to show for it. Veda looked towards the window, as if someone might be outside to explain her. Roy exhaled an old breath. One cousin said, "We didn't know she did this." It was the truest thing spoken by anyone but Anna all morning. The meeting ended without ceremony. No hands were shaken. Anna touched my elbow, a small human signal in a room full of paper signals. As we left, Veda spoke once more, near my shoulder. "She could have told us," she said, anger pressed flat. I turned to her, steady as a lighthouse battery. "She did," I said, "just not in a way that let you rewrite it." We stepped into the hall. The air outside the room felt rinsed. Downstairs, the day was ordinary, which felt like mercy. We passed the receptionist arranging pencils. The elevator chirped like a small bird that prefers simple truths. Justice, when it is real, usually arrives without applause. It sits. It breathes. It does not perform. We walked to the parking lot in a quiet that did not sting. I held the blue notebook like a hand that had not let go. I moved through the next weeks, as if walking through a garden I had not planted. Tasks unfolded in neat lines. I updated beneficiaries, transferred titles, and filed the documents Anna gave me in a cabinet that closed with a sound like a promise. I visited the little parcel of land inland, where a narrow creek threaded through alders and field grass. The land was unassuming and practical, a place for bees and fences. I stood with my boots in the damp and felt the exact weight of what she left me. It was not a fortune. It was a plan. The house on the hill changed hands with signatures and relief. Veda painted the kitchen a yellow that did not suit the north light and replaced the clock with a modern square that made a brisk sound. It was her right. I took my recipe card and the blue notebook home, set them in a drawer lined with clean paper, and understood that possession can be gentle when you stop asking it to heal old injuries. Mrs. Henley and I developed a rhythm. On Tuesdays, I brought bread. On Fridays, she brought cuttings in small jars and told me where to place them so they would prefer the light. We did not discuss the will in detail. She told me stories about June that did not require commentary. June breaking up a neighborhood argument with Pi, June setting aside crisp bills in a jar labeled taxes, June planting alyssum along the walk so the house would always smell faintly of honey. These stories settled in me like stones placed along a riverbank, guiding the current without stopping it. I started a small bookkeeping practice that specialized in clients like June, people who wanted their accounts to mean more than arithmetic. I met them at their kitchen tables, drank their tea, and left their papers in better order than I found them. I opened a savings account for a scholarship fund in June's name, modest and specific, for practical students who learned late that they were brave. Each deposit felt like a note in a tune I recognized. One Saturday, I returned to the lighthouse. The air was clean and bossy. Families walked along the path, explaining tides to children who would not remember the words, only the cadence. I brought the china teacup in a padded sleeve. Veda had offered it finally, with a shrug that tried to be generous, and almost was. I set the cup on the flat of the stone wall, the sun moving through it exactly as it had in June's kitchen. The light made a little pool. I could almost hear her say that grief, like light, needs something to pass through. Aunt Veda and I found a new language that neither of us liked, though both of us could use it. She invited me to the house for dinner once, set a fork precisely to the left of my plate, and complimented my sweater as if the gesture were a court order. I thanked her, brought dessert, and left early. We would never be easy. We would be civil. Roy paid off an old debt he had with June's estate and sent me a short note that ended with the most honest sentence he owned. She loved you in a way I did not understand. I wrote back that she loved him in a way he could not spend. We were done. The parcel of land needed a fence. I learned to set posts straight, to tamp soil, to stretch wire with a calm hand. Work can be a balm when you stop asking it to be an anthem. When the fence was done, I planted a row of lilacs along the edge, simple and stubborn. These arrived without needing an invitation. In early summer, I invited Mrs. Henley to the field and unfolded a small table beneath the alders. We ate turkey sandwiches and watched the creek practice being a river. I read the letter again, the one that had bruised and salved me in a single page. My girl. These were the first words I learned to trust again. I folded the paper back along its softened lines. Mrs. Henley lifted her chin toward the water. The road was long, she said. You did not carry too much. I carried what was mine, I said. The phrase fit like a well-made coat. That night, in my apartment above the tailor's lamp, I set the blue notebook on my desk and wrote my own first entry on its final blank page. A sum of what the trust held, a note about the scholarship fund, the purchase of fence posts, the cost of lilacs, the surplus that would remain after the month's bills. Then I wrote the line that mattered more than numbers. For Tamsin's boat. The words did not mean escape. They meant direction. I kept the teacup on my windowsill. In the mornings, sun slid through it and warmed the wall, a slender, faithful gesture. I would touch its rim with one finger, not to claim it, but to remember what claiming is supposed to feel like, light and useful. I do not think of the will often now. Paper is necessary. Love is necessary in a different scale. Quiet justice sits between them like a chair pulled out, waiting for you to take your seat. When the scholarship fund sent out its first letter, I walked it to the mailbox like a child walking a bird to the edge of a nest. I had not won anything. I had stewarded something through a narrow passage. I had refused to rage where dignity could do the work. This is not a triumph, only a steadying. The evening light in my apartment is kind. It makes the humble things soft, then softer. The kettle clicks off. The clock says nothing cruel. Somewhere, the tide lifts a boat I cannot see and carries it toward water it likes best. I will walk. I will keep my ledger. I will forgive what can be forgiven, and I will leave the rest to the kind of justice that does not crave witnesses. If this story touched you, share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more stories of quiet revenge.